Well, Danny, on Community, you have to be so almost stoic and unemotional all the time, and we can already tell just talking to you that's not your normal personality. How do you do that in every single episode?
It's not easy. I feel like it takes a lot of work. But I think that's what's fun about it is I really get to kind of bounce around and be this canvas in this really wacky world. And so I tell people that Abed has emotions. I have emotions, experiencing them just as much as anybody else. But I just kind of they're manifested differently. They're not smiley and as vocal. I'm not always like, hey, because if I smile, the bloggers erupt. That's constantly. Like, whoa, what was up with Abed? Like in the My Dinner with Andre episode, I think what was funny is like people had two kind of very visceral reactions, and that wow, Abed was so normal. I didn't like it, or what was wrong with Abed? He was normal, and I found that very interesting. But it's fun to play a character who just experiences the world and emotes differently than most normal people would.
Mm. Well, Danny, I was wondering, what has been your highlight on the show so far in terms of something that's happened behind the scenes? Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
Behind the scenes, like on set. I mean, we've had a lot of very absurd things happen. I mean, just the fact that we have a room that's pretty tiny and that has to hold Ken Jeong, Chevy Chase, and a number of other people in there at the same time. You kind of never know what's going to happen. This year we had a lot of like random things happen on set. And at one point in time, we had some visitors come to set, and the guy proposed to a woman on set and tried to get me involved in the proposal, which I thought was very unusual because he came up to me right before and he's like, "Hey, when we get back on set, I want to propose to my girlfriend." It was a couple visiting from Dallas, and he's like, "Do you think this would be a good idea?" And that's when I got really nervous because I was like, "Buddy, if you haven't thought this through, don't ask me if this is a good idea because I don't know." So it turned out it was a really like magical thing. But she said yes, thankfully, and then we just ended up going right into a city group scene where Chevy was making fun of us. So I thought that was a very unusual day. But every day is very absurd and fun, and I think that's what's kind of cool about it is that we all get to play together, and I do feel like it's like daycare. Just everyone shows up, our parents drop us off, give us a bag lunch, and they're like, "All right, now go play together." And as long as no one gets hurt, that's always a good thing.
Well, the show changes styles and whole different methods of approach every single week almost. What's it like for you as an actor to get the script and see what you're going to get to do that week?
That's always like really exciting. It's we have our table reads pretty much every Monday, and you can kind of tell we're all like a little giddy as we walk to the office to see what's in the script because none of us ever really know, and our scripts are pretty last minute, and you never. Especially with our show, every episode is so completely different that by the end of the season you forget what you did half the year. Just because you're focused on, well, this week we have to figure out how to be stop motion animated, and I think that's the real fun of it, though, especially for someone like me. I've always dreamed to be part of something where there's a lot of variety, and I think there's the great thing about our show is that it could go anywhere, the fact that we've had an episode about stop motion this year, the fact that we did a Dungeons and Dragons episode, like all these different things we can do is really a testament to Dan Harmon and the writers for creating this world of Greendale where anything can happen. So for us, it's really exciting, and it's also a little terrifying because all of a sudden I'm like, has anyone here ever heard of My Dinner with Andre? And then all of a sudden I have 2 days to figure out what this film is about. Or, it's sometimes it's scary when they're like, "Hey, Danny, how's your, John Hamm impression?" And I'm like, "What are we doing here?" I don't have one. What do you mean, how is my John Hamm impression?
You got 24 hours to come up with one.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So it's fun, it's challenging, and it's never boring. So I love it.
Well, I'll tell you what, although the show does some amazing stuff with genre, the highlight for me, and probably for a lot of people, is your interaction with Donald Glover. It's just such an amazing chemistry you guys have. Tell us about working with him.
It's funny. It's like a lot of people ask us if we knew each other before this show, and we hadn't met, really. That's just one of those things that happened organically. And, And Dan Harmon really just captured it. He saw us kind of interacting in a couple of interviews and just started adding that. And our first tag, that was the La Biblioteca rap, which I still have, people coming up to me all the time and going, "Donde está?" like at airports. And it's unusual, but I just think it's so funny that how something like that could just really kind of make waves throughout, virally and across languages too. Because I have people come up to me in very different languages, and we all connect over bad Spanish. So I find that really interesting. But Donald he's just a really brilliant, funny, and very just natural guy. So it just became like an instant connection. We really feel like we're like brothers, and it's fun for us too because. At the end of the show, we don't really have to adhere to any story or plot so much. We can kind of just have 30 seconds to a minute to do whatever we want and see how many T-shirts we can fit on each other, or how many pencils we can fit into each other's mouths, or whatever. And I always feel very safe in many ways with Donald because he's so funny that we always know we'll come up with something. And that's kind of the fun thing about this show is that they allow us that kind of thing. Even Nicole Brown at one point was like, "You guys are like Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street." And then they were like, "Why don't you guys do a Bert and Ernie tag?" And literally we just showed up to set. They gave us some sweaters, and we're like, "What do you want to do? Let's eat some cookies, pretend we're puppets." And then next thing you know, Donald improvises this thing about his cousin Dimitri missing his funeral. That's the fun about the show is that where else could we get away with that? And it being, I feel like it's a show within the show just for us. And I think, both Donald and a lot of us are comedy nerds too and had this love of Saturday Night Live. And it's almost like our opportunity to do a little bit of a sketch show or Saturday Night Live kind of thing too. So it's just another thing to do in the show, which I find really funny. Yeah.
Well, the TV Critics have singled you out. You're nominated in this brand new Broadcast TV Critics Awards next week. And you might get some Emmy recognition as well later on this summer. If you do, you're going to have to choose one episode from this past season. Do you have a particular one in mind? Do you have a favorite one for your acting, what they wrote for you as an actor as well as the character?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of episodes I have that are just really fun for me. What I love about Abed and playing this character is that oftentimes I could just kind of be there and just be involved, even though I'm not really involved, like when I got to deliver a baby. So I think that'd be I think that'd be a very interesting Emmy submission choice, is the entire episode I'm not there, but I'm there. For me, the most challenging, I would say, was definitely the Birthday My Dinner with Andre Pulp Fiction surprise party episode. And the minute we talked about that episode, that was directed by Richard Ayoade, and it was such an interesting and bold idea, and I still am like shocked that we got away with it because it's literally two characters talking about Cougar Town, and I'm doing this very passionate monologue about pooping my pants on the set of Cougar Town. And if you just read that at face value, I was like, I can't believe I get to do this. I get to give a monologue about pooping my pants, something I've always wanted to do. Yeah, and working with Joel, I just feel like there's so many people that make this show so good. And Joel, for instance, is such a great and tremendous actor, and he's got this range. And I'm just so happy that we get an opportunity to do something like that, where we get to do really silly stuff, but that's very grounded in these two characters discovering, that they have these fears and where they come from, and also really opening up to each other. And I think that episode to me was really a fun episode overall, just because we really got to show each other a little bit more of our souls. And I just think that was really interesting and challenging too, because it's not often that Abed has to really, kind of embrace this natural, or almost like trying to be like a real person or interact or have a real conversation. And that to me was just a really, really cool thing to try and do. I think that's a good one, as well as Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's a really just fun episode for our show. Yeah. I just think that the fact that we were able to pull off an episode about Dungeons and Dragons in a study room the whole time. And,
so good.
I still laugh at Chevy's villainous character in that episode, which I think is hilarious.
Well, yeah. I mean, it'd be great for the Emmy voters to, cotton on to this show. They've just haven't really noticed it yet. And what do you think it's going to take for Community to follow through with all this critical acclaim that it has?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like it's a mixed blessing in some ways, because I do feel like we came along when there was a lot of other shows that had a lot more press and a lot of things going on, you know. I always think of the stories that we shoot right next to Glee on the Paramount slot. And I remember at one point in time we had a couple of people walking onto set and they were like, "Is this Glee?" And we were like, "No." And then they're like, "Oh, okay, we're looking for Glee." And then they left. And I was like, that was pretty funny. I was like, meanwhile, we were getting away with a very strange episode about a monkey and a pen, you know. And I kind of feel like we're getting away with something, which is pretty special. So, you know, it's nice that we're starting to finally get some buzz, though, and it's cool, and I hope it leads to more viewers, and I'm just thankful. But I think, like anything with our show, it's pretty specific, and it takes a little while to catch on. You know, I think a lot of people, at first, we're not really sure what our show is doing, and I think now, like, what's really fun is when I meet someone who watches our show, they're not just a typical fan, they're pretty active fans, and they can quote episodes, and they'll come up to me and be like, cool, you know, or, you know, they'll do very specific things, which I think is cool, is that our fans, they're definitely not just ones that have seen an episode or so. They're not like, hey, I love the paintball episode. They're like, I love the Modern Warfare episode. They know the titles of the episodes. And for me, that's what's really cool. And Joel mentioned before that at Comic-Con we really experienced that. And that to me was just mind-blowing, because we do live in sort of a bubble where we're shooting all day, and you know, I know my mom watches the show. Thanks, Mom. But whenever I see somebody else come up to me and say stuff about the show that I don't know, I'm always floored that it's actually out there. So it's nice to be in people's living rooms on Thursday nights. Yeah.
We'll talk a little about the Christmas episode. You mentioned it earlier. It's stop motion. It's like the old Rankin Bass Christmas specials that we all grew up on. I mean, how did you guys pull that off? That was just, I don't know where that even comes from in somebody's mind.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to Dan Harmon and Dino Stamatopoulos, who plays Starburns on our show. He's also a consultant and writer. And I think those two came together because they had done some stop-motion work together. Dino worked on Frankenhole. And I just thought that was such a brilliant idea. The minute we heard grumblings of a holiday special episode, I think all of us were really giddy. And I definitely grew up with that, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty, and watching it every Christmas with my family. Was the one, opportunity for nobody to fight, so I thought that was special. And I think it took them, 8 weeks or so, maybe even longer, to do all the animation, and they had a whole studio do it, and it was incredible. I mean, the amount of effort and detail that they had working, these people working full-time, working on just literally animating a finger going up and down, Not to mention Ludwig Göransson's score and the music, because there's so much music in that, which is wonderful. But that was another special thing, and that's something, too, where I'm always like, we get to do so many crazy, fun things on our show, and the fact that we got to do an animated show where we got to be our, dolls, better-looking versions of ourselves, was pretty awesome. So, and that's what's fun, too, is like this past Christmas I went home, and it was literally on Christmas Day, and I thought that was just such an interesting thing that, as a kid, I'd be watching Christmas specials with my family, and now, after Vigilia and having a Polish Christmas with my mom, we're watching animated Community episode where, I'm talking about Lost and stuff, So it's really special. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, Danny, listen, there is so much goodwill for this show and for the cast, and hopefully the Emmys will start to realise that. So we do wish you all the best this summer, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, it's nice to have a job, and it's nice that we're out there in Australia. I love it. So thank you guys so much, and we really appreciate the support. And I look forward to hopefully wearing a suit at one of these events.
Cool.